Good evening, Suidlanders. I do hope you are well. Tonight we have a very special guest all the way from America. It's Alexander Augustine. Welcome, Alexander. I do hope you're well this evening. And yes, let's start. I first want to ask you to tell us a bit more about yourself. How you got into this field and what was appealing for you to start doing something about the situation in America.
I'm Alexander Augustine. I do stuff on TikTok and social media and stuff like that. I always say this, that I only got into it. If you guys don't know anything about me, but I was just this fat kid weighing 300 pounds 2 years ago, who was wanting to be a computer programmer, right? And it was the left and all this crazy shit that was being pushed onto us, getting told that you're evil over and over again, that everything about you and my culture, my people, my religion is absolutely evil and abhorrent. That sort of made me who I am right now. So if they want to know who created me, it's them. The reason I get into this stuff is because I see I see what I believe to be the future as an abject, horrible time to live. I see the really destruction of a lot of things which I value, and I don't think that you can just afford any longer to stay silent or to not fight actively against the war that is being waged against you.
Well, that is I think that's very very true, that these pressures of liberals on how you should feel guilty of what race you are or what gender you are, especially for males, and especially in America. We always read like gender-based narratives, that's so against white males, and it's so shocking, that you can't believe that people can be that unrealistic and that illogical, that unlogical. Even like one video you made a while ago about that they wanted to stop the process of like a girl being a girl or a boy being a boy, and then at 16 that they get to choose what gender they are. So even that, it's just hectic, reading all of these things. But can you explain a bit more for you? When did it basically start that you saw all of these people, or all of these different liberals or teachers or shop owners or whoever, these people, how did it start that you noticed that they were absolutely anti-white, anti-male? What became really obvious to you?
Now, when I was a kid and stuff like that, I was much more libertarian and everyone can just do whatever they want type thing. But only when it started being a concerted effort against us. I didn't collectivize myself with white people or collectivize myself with Christians or anything. I was a fucking atheist. I don't know if we're allowed to swear. I'm sorry. I was an atheist and stuff like that. But when it is, they are collectivizing you and understanding you and your group that they have placed you into as the enemy, as the ultimate evil, then I feel like you can't afford any longer to be an individual. You can't afford any longer to say, well, I'm just this individual here. I'm not part of this group. They put you in this group. I labeled you as this evil enemy. And now you're sort of here, and you need to stand up for what's trying to be enforced on you. And it's not just this crazy stuff we're seeing coming from the internet anymore, coming from Twitter or Tumblr or social media, Instagram. It is being enacted into legislation, like you were talking about with the transgender stuff. It's not just, oh, I want the right to have my own kids transition and take hormone blockers, have their genitals removed, have their breasts removed. I don't want that for myself. I want it to be in legislation now. I want to be able to, in the school system, have all of our agents filling your kids with these thoughts. And if they ever have a weak moment and say to any sort of, authority figure, oh, I think maybe I am transgender after you've been telling me this for 2 years. I think maybe I am. Well, if you live in Oregon right now, this is legislation. If you live in Oregon, you have a 13-year-old kid, they can now consent to surgery that will remove their penis. They can consent to surgery that will remove their breast, that will have them on hormone blockers. And this isn't stuff you can go back from. You do not need parental consent for any of this stuff. And they're moving not just in these hellhole like liberal states anymore, but to federal. And this is where we're going. So they're beginning to enact all of their ideas on this like new world and new people onto us, and that's why I started looking into it.
Yeah. No, that's really shocking. That's honestly, it's gobsmacking. You almost don't know how to react to that. It's really so far-fetched and crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. So in South Africa, we've always been, very culturally devised, in the sense that we have very different cultural groups in South Africa. And for examples, we have like this tribe in KwaZulu-Natal, and it's like they're like 22% of the population, and they're like the Zulu tribe, and they still have some of their traditions that they keep. Then you have the Xhosas that also have some of their traditions that they keep. So in South Africa, we've always had that cultural division from each other. But I have to admit that we have that parallel with you as well, that the division that might have been there is been so enlarged by the pressures of classifying people in different groups, and ultimately you are being affected by this, and you were actually individual completely. So that is absolutely something that we have in common. What is your main worries for America at this moment, as like a young man in America, other than what we just spoke about? What is like some of the other main worries that you see unfolding in front of you, and you just don't know how it's possible that things like this can happen?
I would say it's kind of specific to America and a lot of stuff. Well, I don't know too much about how your politics work, right? But in America right now, we have a class of politicians who really make up. They have nothing in common with the average American people. They have nothing in common with the people they're supposed to represent in our republic. They are getting into Washington, coming from this class, like economically, of this like pseudo aristocracy of political elites, and then as they go there, it's really just a game of corporate influence of different countries, foreign entities influencing us, such as China, Israel, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia have massive amounts of control over American politics, and them teamed with these corporations are essentially attempting to enact like a very globalized worldview, where no longer will America really have any sort of say over its own policies or politics. We're moving towards this like this UN-based world where all of our laws, all of our ideas are going to be coming from Europe, or going to be coming from the halls of the UN, really coming from China and stuff like that. And corporations are moving to remove any sort of control over the free market into their own hands. We see stuff like the Great Reset and all of that. An increased infringements on our own privacy, where we're going to have our toaster, which is hooked up to the internet, which is constantly monitoring the communications which are happening in your house. All of this constructing like social profiles on people, being able to convey that information into intensive algorithms and artificial intelligence. It sounds like crazy conspiracy theory stuff, I'm sure, but like it's stuff that they're very openly talking about, but really just no one cares about. It just seems there's a huge disconnect between the ideal reality or the ideal future with these people who rule us and with the average American or even the average South African. And all of this is, combined with, as you were talking about, the cultural differences and issues. The reason I think South Africa is very interesting is because I think that we're really headed there. this idea that we are bringing in all these different cultural groups into America, which used to be a majority white country, used to be 87% white. Now it's, I believe, 59, 63% in one person's lifetime, right? And we're also doing this and telling everyone who comes in that all of their issues are because of us. We are white supremacists and we are evil for it. And literally every single aspect of your life is made worse by the existence of white people. It seems like a very bad duality here, where we're losing majority, we're losing political control, and then also we're saying we need to give you reparations, we need to give you more benefits, and everything is white people's fault. So soon there's going to be a minority of white people who are absolutely demonized in this country. And as we're seeing legislation now coming out in affirmative action and in sort of like exclusively beneficial to minorities and socially disadvantaged people. Sorry for rambling there.
No, I'm taking little notes so that I can get to each thing that you said. So firstly, that is also a case in South Africa, that a lot of other countries have a very big impact on South Africa, because we are drowning in debt. Literally, our debt and GDP ratio is like 82.7%, and it's only going to increase. And they can hardly afford paying the interest on the debt. So it's just hectic. And like, citizens have the highest taxes that they've ever seen in South Africa, and our economy is just like, after last year it just shrunk, and after the second quarter of last year we were in like deep recession. And this year is differently because we're not on that strict lockdown anymore, so of course the GDP is going up then. But cooperations have a lot of control, and it's something even we as South Africans realize, not only for us but also for you in America. I mean, I actually read about the history of Pierpont Morgan. I can't remember his first name, but he was basically like, I think, the first man that really had that much control of America, and was basically the first with President Roosevelt, who first was beginning to be worried that one individual, a cooperation, had this much impact on a country. So it even like started small with that, but now it's so developed. I mean, even with Bill Gates, I'm having so much control already, and he's an individual. He's got nothing to do with making policies at all. And so that is hectic. And it even makes me think of like the World Economic Forum. They have like these 8 goals. I don't know if you've seen it, but they have like these 8 goals for 2030. And one of them is going to be, you're going to own nothing and you're going to be happy. You're going to rent everything. So you're basically going to own nothing. And like George Washington said, private property is like, if you have private property, it's like directly linked to freedom. But it's not just private property. It's like everything. You're going to literally own nothing. And they're not even a government, they're just rich financier financiers and very influential people.
Well, someone has to own something, that's what I'm getting at is, if you own nothing, if you're renting everything, the World Economic Forum, what you're talking about is the most recent one called the Great Reset. If you own nothing, who owns it? Who owns your house if you're renting your house? You're going to be renting them from JP Morgan and Chase, who you're talking about, who's still a very active, corporation in America. And what we see in our economy is a combination of vertical horizontal alliances between different corporations in the same step of the supply chain, and horizontal control of these areas. So you have one area of a supply chain which is entirely dominated by one single corporation, right? But what you see as well is they're pairing this with vertical alliances up and down the supply chain, where they're all these different corporations will have beneficial relationships and protect each other's interest on the different levels of supply chain. And that's just monopoly or corporate tyranny, where you have, a group, a handful of corporations who are via alliances and different sort of networks to protect each other, capable of enacting complete economic control, and they want even more control, right? And people always say, oh, just invent your own Twitter if you don't want to get canceled for free speech. Well, what do I do when the banking departments don't want a new Twitter and they're in alliance with Twitter, and they say, how about this? How about you can't use our bank anymore? How about you can't make money off of any of these platforms anymore? And all of these corporations own mainstream media as well. In America, 5 corporations control all of our media. So how do you think people are going to report on you? Oh, you're evil Nazis, you need to get deplatformed, and all this other stuff. And that's where we are, and we're going even further economically into this. And if you look at the World Economic Forum, if you look at the WHO, if you look at the UN, these are organizations which are completely infiltrated by the Chinese, and they are completely infiltrated by lobbyists on behalf of these corporations to enact their will upon them. And all these nameless bureaucrats who do operate and run the WEF, the WHO, and the UN, they are being bought and sold by corporations and foreign entities. So we are losing any sort of representation for the average citizen of a country. And that's only economically what we're looking at in the future, not to mention all this other stuff.
No, that's true. That's really true. And they've placed themselves in such a position of power that they are actually completely above the law, and if not even impacting the law itself that's instituted. Even if you look at China, as you just named, they have this Muslim minority called the Uyghurs. I don't know how much you know about that, but basically it's been reported like multiple times that the Uyghurs are being sent to camps, and there's been victims speaking up about what's happening in these camps. And it's just the UN, they're basically above the law. They're so strong. China is so mighty that no one can basically stand up to them. So that's really very mind-boggling, knowing that it's only developing more and more, and we're going to see more of this. This idea of human rights is not going to exist in a couple of years, and all of these big groups and corporations are going to be above the law, and already is. But I just want to recall, you said earlier about this ideal reality, and it just made me thought about there was this Russian defector, and Yuri Bezmenov, and he basically elaborated on cultural subversion and how there's like 4 steps. On the first one is demoralization, and it's the point of the whole idea of cultural subversion is to get someone to completely be demoralized and not be able to, even if they get substantial evidence, even if they see something happening in front of them, they're incapable of registering it as a normal person and interpreting it as something dangerous or something that can do them potential harm. It's just they're so demoralized they can't do that. And you basically just have to demoralize one generation, and then all of the generations that follow them are just a bit hopeless, because they're they are educated by the demoralized generation. So that's really interesting, and it's sad, for your people and for your culture, because you're really proud of your culture and you want it to be preserved, of course. Going to the next subject, that's something that's really interesting for me.
Can I briefly touch on that?
Yes, sorry.
It's very present in America, that demoralization, and it's it's systemic. It's done on purpose, right? Where culturally and racially, you are being taught a very specific narrative your entire life. The second you go as an American, as a white guy going into kindergarten in America, you're the first thing about history, and the only thing really you're taught about history is about colonization, is about slavery, and then it's about the Holocaust. You're being taught constantly this narrative of everything about you is evil. And this is something which is continued all through your academic career and is most definitely continued in college, where there are outright Marxists who are teaching kids. And then, once your academic conditioning is over, after you have all of this in your head, what do? You turn on, CNN, you turn on MSNBC after you've worked the entire day, and these are people who are reinforcing this narrative even further. So how do you wake people up? It's really impossible when these people have been programmed to think literally since the second they have been getting taught by anyone to think in such a specific manner, and that's where we are. It's very true what's happened to us.
And even when they start, which rarely happens, but even if they get like this epiphany that they're wrong, which really I've never even seen happen, they just get so depressed on the reality of everything that they just stick their head in the ground like an ostrich. But it's really shocking how censorship has evolved, even like in the last 2 years. Honestly, things that you would be able to find on YouTube or Google or anywhere, it's just you rarely find things that's things of substance for someone that's conservative or someone that wants to know something truthful. Even like I read an essay like a couple of months ago, and it was basically like about a man. His name was Ralph Scott, and he had like 40 years. He was a professor at a university, and he made a statement about forced busing, which didn't fit the narrative. And he basically just lost job after job after job. And for 40 years, it went on and on and on. And it's just terrible because this persecution or prosecution, this prosecution of people that are honest, brutally honest, and then this censorship, and you just don't know where it's going to end necessarily. But that's where we, in a certain sense, in South Africa, with the Suidlanders specifically, we focus on strong inner groups and having strong communication systems. And it's a long explanation, but it's basically, we believe you start in your community, with your people around you that are like-minded, and you build within those groups, and you build trust, and then it starts to become more likely to be preserved, other than just being one person or just screaming against the storm and nothing will happen. So yes, that's censorship is very evolved. So
yeah, in my time in social media, it's really wild, because there's really two forms of censorship which happen, which is where they'll just delete you, all the while, by the way, that they for having any sort of counter narrative, they're trying to actively ruin your life, right? They are trying to make it so that you can't get a job. They're trying to smear you. They're trying to ostracize you from society. But just as you are actively participating on social media, or you're actively participating against the narrative, they will delete you. They will delete your account. My account got deleted, and I restarted. And they will remove your posts. They'll remove stuff like that. But then there's a much more insidious version, which is like the shadow banning or like shadow censorship, which has happened to me on TikTok specifically, and Instagram, and pretty much everywhere, where they will just sort of secretly and without telling you, without informing you, they will one day just like make it so no one can really see anything that you're doing, right? And you're just sort of left there thinking, oh, does no one agree with me? Am I not making good points anymore? Am I just producing a bunch of garbage? And if you ask them about it, they'll say, oh no, we're not doing anything about it. But what's hilarious is on TikTok and on Instagram, they'll show you the analytics. They'll show you what they're doing to you, and then they'll deny reality and say, oh no, it's simply not happening. Let's talk about this, right? Because I'm insane. I'm a lunatic for believing that they're censoring me in such a manner. Starting on February 3rd, I have 0% people on my TikTok who are able to see my videos who don't follow me. They literally show you 0% non-followers are seeing your videos, right? And they'll tell me I'm insane. Just suddenly, 200,000 people decided to stop watching my videos one day because I was producing garbage videos, right?
It sounds like the voter fraud in America, a sudden spike.
Yeah, just suddenly. You know, in the months prior, let's think about this. In December, by the end of December, I had gone from 40,000 followers on TikTok to 100,000. And then by the end of January, I'd gone from 100,000 to 200,000, right? And then February 3rd to the end of February, I got 3,000 new followers, okay? And that is just that I have stopped making quality content, clearly, that people have just stopped watching me. You know, and on Instagram too, I think 2%, they'll tell me 2% of people who don't follow you watch these videos. Well, I'll fucking thank you for spreading the message, and thank you for the algorithm support there, I gotta say. If you look at like, it's all based on like to view ratio and stuff like that, and I can pull half of the people who are viewing my video will like it, you know, and I'll get, you know, no traction whatsoever on the algorithm. But if you look at someone spreading a left-wing narrative, if you look at someone who's openly communist, right, trying to spread their narrative, they'll get 1,000 likes and they'll get 200,000 views. You know, so what's really going on here? They'll say nothing. They'll completely deny it. But really, it's censorship and promotion of a certain narrative on these media platforms, and you're just expected to make your own social media, or, you know, make your own internet. It's insane.
No, it's really, really, really insane, the censorship. I mean, even we had this struggle with talking about certain topics, and they would just immediately throw it off. You know, they would pick it up if we talk about certain things, and they would just throw it off immediately, and we just can't share it at all. And it's actually something so crucial to talk about, and that's the whole big problem about it. But I actually really want to discuss the subject with you as an American. So in South Africa, we also hear a lot about police brutality. Next week, there's going to be a lot of students protesting because, you know, against the use of rubber bullets. So in South Africa, when they protest, they use guns and rubber bullets, and someone died because of it. So they're going to protest next week. So I actually want to ask you, you know, the George Floyd case started recently with the police officer that apparently killed him. So, you know, how does your conservative communities truly view police brutality in America? What's truly for you? Because we, yet again, just, you know, hear this certain narrative from international mainstream media.
Yeah, I think this case, like, I try to view it with nuance, right? And I feel like a lot of nuance is lost. It's either, you know, there's no police brutality and there's no issue whatsoever, police brutality on the right, or on the left, you know, they're spreading this narrative that, like, police are just going around with machine guns shooting black people for fun, right? But like, should you know, Derek Chauvin have, you know, kneeled on George Floyd for like 10 minutes? No, he shouldn't have, right? But was it a racist thing? No, it's simply that you know, no one likes having police officers interact with you and be annoying and be like power tripping assholes, right? No one likes that. And is there an issue? Sure. But is it like a racial issue? No, really, it simply is not. You know, if you look at the, you know, the George Floyd case, which is, you know, oh, this is systemic racism and all that, right? We have the police chief of their district is black. They have tons of black officers working at their police department. The district attorney is black. The judge locally over all of this is black. You know, the city councilors are all black. The first black transsexual is the vice president of, you know, the place, the city of Minneapolis. So you know, where's the white supremacy here? Is it the black vice president? You know, is it the black district attorney? Is it the black police chief? Who's doing the white supremacy? But that is not important. What is important is pushing this narrative that white people are evil, white people are killing you and white supremacy is everywhere and we need to destroy it. And by the way, white supremacy just means white people, that's all that definition really means when you look at it.
No, that's true. And like this anti-white narrative and propaganda, like for example, in South Africa, as you said before we started the video, you said about that you've seen like politicians sing "Kill the Boer," which is like very common. Like it's basically sung at each EFF rally. So the EFF is like a parliamentary party, and they're like overt Marxists, and like their name is Economic Freedom Fighters, but they're exactly the opposite of economic freedom fighters. But other than that, they basically sing it at each rally, and their politician or their leader, Julius Malema, is the one that made this statement with the journalists, and he said that we're not calling for the killing of white peoples yet. And that was like his words. And then last year in October, it was the 16th of October, and he basically, he said at one of his rallies, one of the people working with him sang, burn these Boers, call the fire brigade, burn these Boers. And it was 48 hours later where there was between 30 to 40 different arson attacks on the farms and on the Boers in the surrounding areas. And in the Free State and so. And it basically burned 339 farms. And that all was instigated by the mere singing of a song. And like farm murders as well. You get these rallies where they sing "Kill the Boer," and then there's a farmer brutally murdered. And like last year, the murders spiked. There was less attacks, but there were more murders. And even like, the statistics on farm murders, they're not really, since 2007, there's not really reporting on the murders from the government side. And even like in international media, we were so relieved when in 2018, Donald Trump, made the statement that Secretary Pompeo should investigate the farm murders. And it was like, there was someone stepping on your chest, and it was just like, a little bit of relief, knowing that someone outside of South Africa actually is, wondering about these things. And then all of these mainstream groups just said, no, it's a conspiracy theory. No, it's not true. And even like with the terrible jokes, I saw this terrible joke that they made of Trump and white farmers being murdered. But yet again, it's also this anti-white propaganda, this anti-white narrative. And even our president and the ruling government, they began singing the war song of "Kill the Boer." So yes, it's very, very bad in South Africa with that anti-white propaganda, and it's very effective, But
in America, after Trump said that, it wasn't just like, oh, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. It's you're buying into white supremacy conspiracy theories. You're a white supremacist for even acknowledging, that there's any sort of violence being targeted against white people because they are white, because of anti-white racial hatred. If you acknowledge it at all, this is counter to the narrative, and you are broadly labeled with these terms of racist and white supremacist and Nazi, which are used essentially just to control people's minds and force them to concede to the narrative. That clearly the only evil that's happening in the world is racism caused by white people, which is what they want really at the end of the day.
Yes, no, that's true. And it's just, it's just terrible that, something so honest can be made as a conspiracy theory. I mean, and then even after that, like the head of one of our agricultural companies in South Africa explained to people what makes farm murders different than normal murders, other than it gets motivated on social media. I mean, there's a lot of motivation on social media for murdering a white person or murdering a farmer. Other than that, the attackers literally wait for the farmers to get home. And in many cases, they don't steal anything. They just torture them for hours and then they kill them. And not just they brutally torture them. Like if you even hear some of the stories of what happens, it's just, you know, there's no words to explain it to someone. And something else that makes it also completely different than other crime in South Africa is that it literally gets applauded. If there's a farmer murdered, they applaud it on social media. You cannot believe it. So it's really shocking, but it just adds to this, you know, wide scale anti-white narrative. And then also that the anti-white narrative is a conspiracy, but it's just, it's part of what's systemically happening. What effect does this police brutality narrative, or not this narrative, what does police brutality have on the stability? You know, let me just see. In South Africa, we usually joke that our English gets finished sometimes. Oh, no, okay, now I know exactly what I wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you, what effect does this this narrative of police brutality have on the stability of your communities? Do you think after like the case opened that there's a lot of unrest, not even just by, you know, rioting, but how are people, you know, treating each other racially wise? Or do you think that there's suddenly you can see, oh, this person is really suddenly an activist, or suddenly everyone is an activist against police brutality? Do you say there's a lot more instability and you can see that's increasing?
Yeah, obviously there's so much more like racial hatred and stuff like that. The like anti-white narrative of like, you know, you're all whites are racist, and you know we need to combat white supremacy, which is everything to do with any white people. We need more affirmative action. It's all like way been elevated by this stuff. I would say that like one of the most like funny things that's happened out of all of this is that they've spread a like an absolute fear amongst police of answering to calls that might put them in a position where they need to do anything against a black person. They are trying obviously to defund the police and are doing so in quite a few areas, which is just leading to elevated crime rates. And the police who don't want to go into these neighborhoods anymore because they know that if I answer this domestic dispute, there's probably going to be a guy who's high on crack come out and I'm going to have to put him down, you know, and they'd rather just not deal with that. So they're sort of making themselves suffer even more for it. And I think it's just when you're talking about like the cultural impacts of that, there's so many people who are activists who don't really care about any of this stuff, right? I'm kind of cynical maybe, where I think that a lot of politics or the political opinions of people who don't really care about this, or like the sort of like normal people or like mainstream, it's all just virtue signaling and a means of showing where they are in society because of this demoralization, which we talked about earlier, that they have been so ingrained into them to think that, oh, I'm a equality activist, you know, I'm a feminist, I'm a you know, X, Y, and Z, I support Black Lives Matter. This is something which signals to others that they are of good standing in society, which is something that every human very much innately desires, to be a part of a group, to be virtuous and of good standing in said group. And it's really replaced virtue and morality, at least in America, where instead of wanting to be of good standing in a society by being a virtuous person, by being a God-fearing Christian, by being you know, a mother, by being a productive member of society, they can still get that psychological effect of being a good, virtuous person in a group by being a Black Lives Matter person and posting a black square, you know, on Instagram, or, you know, all this stuff. It's all part of this this narrative. It's all part of what they are pushing. And George Floyd and all this stuff, it's just a continuation and an escalation, I think, of what's being pushed on people.
And what between what groups are absolutely just the highest tension? Is it more conservative against liberalism, or do you think, or would you say that the effect of this different liberal narratives really had such a success over liberal and conservative that the highest tension is between races?
I think that there is the highest tension is between sort of everyone and white people. If that makes any sense. It's mainstream Republicans don't understand that there's a war against them, right? The most common thing that we hear in America from mainstream Republicans is, oh, look at the Democrats. They're the real racists. They're the real people who hate, black people and stuff like that. So you're already accepting their narrative that there is like this cabal of white supremacists who need to be combated at all costs. But we're Republicans. We're not about that. And the white people who are on the left, they are still in conflict with themselves. Whereas they believe that they are inherently evil. They are inherently, they're very self-loathing about being white. It just, as for happenstance of being born white, they hate themselves for it. And they feel like they need to be destroyed. Their institutions need to be destroyed. And they need to actively every single day be in penance for their own whiteness in order to try to make it up to black people. And then black people, of course, who are, applauding them for hating themselves for being white, and who are stoking these flames of saying, no, you actually, you're not sorry enough. You white Republicans, you're not sorry at all about it. This isn't good at all. So it's a duality between white self-loathing and active racial tensions and hatred being stoked.
I actually saw like a couple of videos on white people actually apologizing for being white and admitting to white privilege, and it was just so shocking that you can hate yourself so much. It's just something I can't comprehend at all. I can't get my mind around it at all. But that only makes you realize how effective the demoralization has actually been, and there's a lot of programs, I haven't watched, but I've read the name, and it's like this one program called Dear White People. And then on YouTube, you also have a lot of videos, and it's like messages to white people or this to white people. And it's just so, it's just terrible. You get so frustrated. I can never watch it through because you can't believe that there's actually white people that listen to this and actually feel bad for being white and being so self-destructive. It's like, as I said, I can't wrap my mind around it at all. But how has affirmative action policies in America, race-based specifically, changed, over I know it's a bit early to ask, but, since the inauguration of Biden, we've already heard a couple of his statements that he's going to progress women and Black people, the minorities. How has it progressed?
Okay, so very recently there was a coronavirus relief bill, which was a legislative spending act, which empowered them to spend $1.4 trillion or $1.9 trillion, which is, even for America, a pretty insane amount of money to be spending. That's almost what we spend in an entire year. And now we're spending on this. And really, it did nothing. It didn't really do anything at all to deal with coronavirus. And it was hilariously 5,193 or 5,593 pages. So that they were hoping that I think no one would read it whatsoever, just because of how dense it was. And I was stupid enough to try to read it. And dealing with it was pretty insane because every single word in it is, oh, well, with this bill, we are modifying this other bill, which you also have to read in accordance with policy from this bill. So it's super dense. It's, impossible legalese for the average person to read. And it's, 5,000 pages, right? But if you actually do read it, like I did, to the best of my own ability, you see quite a few things, which is, and this is passed recently, right? This is law now. There are specific jobs in the government now via this bill, which are only available to non-white people. So, each different department is now only hiring a select amount of jobs to non-white people. There are land grants, which are going exclusively to non-white people, hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on these programs where, if you are not white, if you're a socially disadvantaged person, which is how they qualify them. But if you read the definition that they put, what a socially disadvantaged person is, they haven't come up with it yet. But what it really means in the text is not a person who's not white, who's socially disadvantaged or historically disadvantaged, right? So if you are a farm owner, you are a socially disadvantaged non-white person, non-white being the only qualifier here, or a woman, in some cases, you can get loans. If you take out loans to own your business or to own your farm, they will forget your debt to them from the government. So they're giving debt forgiveness for non-white people in certain cases. They're expanding quite a few ways where non-white people can get loans from the government. And government loans, they're like the best, right? Because you don't have to pay crazy amount of interest, and often it's very like on the side of the loan taker rather than the person trying to make a profit off of you taking a loan. So all these small businesses are getting government loans because they're non-white. So if you're a white person trying to apply for a loan for a small business, well, if you're black, it would be so much easier, and you would get a much beneficial contract for starting a small business. It's like really there's far too much to just talk about. There's programs which are specifically for non-white people to give them training, to give them education, scholarships, stuff like that. In this bill, which is supposed to be about coronavirus, right?
Yeah.
But apparently, black people had it much fucking harder than I did going through coronavirus, I gotta say. Because they are getting hundreds of millions more dollars from the government in debt forgiveness, in free jobs to them, in scholarships, and we're this is something that's been happening for years, right? And it's really hard to quantify what affirmative action has been, because it's not just, oh, we want to give you free stuff. It's, well, we're going to give you beneficial loans. We're going to make those loans exclusive to you. We are going to give you free scholarships. We are going to give you free housing. We're going to give you everything. It's really everything across the board. It's just like a million times better to be black when it comes to government sponsorships, loans, anything. And you obviously have to ask the question, well, if we're just trying to target generational poverty, we're just trying to target people who've had it rough. They have no education experience. No one in their family has been educated. They don't have access to good food. They are living in a food desert. They don't have access to a good public school. Why is it then that race is the qualifier, not income? If I'm making $200,000 a year, right? I'm a black dude making $200,000 a year. My son is going to qualify to all these beneficial loans. My son is going to qualify for all these scholarships to go to college for free. But if I'm some poor fucking farmer from Kentucky, where there is generational poverty for 200 years, no one in my family has ever gone to high school or finished high school. No one in my family has gone to college. No one in my family has ever made more than $10,000 a year. I don't qualify for any of this stuff. I'm just sort of screwed, So we're not addressing poverty. We are not addressing generational issues. We're not addressing even black poverty, because if I make $200,000 a year as a black dude, I'm still qualified, right? It's simply just beneficial to certain races and not to others, which is like antithetical to the Constitution.
Yes. Now, I actually read a bit about that relief, that the so-called COVID relief bill, and I only read it because I was quickly going through a couple of things, and I saw Alexander Ocasio-Cortez making the statement that we didn't get what we asked for, but we got something. So she just radical as crazy. But I can completely agree with you. In South Africa, we have this affirmative action policy called BEE. So it's Black Economic Empowerment. And a while back, it was renamed Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment because there was so many cases of corruption and so many cases of, you know, people being preferenced about other people that were cadres of the ANC. So they said, no, we have to change the policy because it's not really helping the poor. So let's make it broad-based. So it's going to help poor Black people as well. So we have a lot of interesting facts around our affirmative action in South Africa. And, you know, our BEE is really not helping. It's only hurting. And as you said, you know, why are they using race as a marker for redress and not socioeconomic conditions? It would have such a different effect. And to even, you know, digress a bit to COVID-19, you know, apparently your relief bill was for COVID, but now it's completely went completely off market in its 5,000, almost 600 pages. And even in South Africa, the COVID had like this perfect playground, or this, it set like the stage for like radical economic reform. And it's just awful that people actually just blindly accept this and follow and accept and follow and not really stand up against it. For example, in South Africa, our tourism sector really got a bad hit after, you know, the COVID. But the president basically, they started this tourism equity trust, and it was basically to support the tourism sector that was failing, but only Black-owned businesses. And then you get like 42.7% of all small businesses in South Africa closed, like permanently closed, and 99% of them were denied UIF, which is basically like help funds. So it's just, you know, it just set like the perfect floor and ground for this radical economic reforms in South Africa, but also in America, as you've been explaining. I mean, I think you are a bit closer to South Africa than 20 years, to be honest, to be really, really honest with you. Because once you get there, that race is like used for redress, and that people hate themselves, and that you get these open attacks on different people only because of their race, then it quickly deteriorates, you know?
Yeah. You know, I've always held this, or like for years, I've held this opinion that, you know, South Africa is really a vision of the future for America. And you guys are still spiraling down. I'm sure each year is worse than the last when it comes to this stuff. But, you know, like I'm here reading stuff about South Africa where there's, you know, all these racially motivated murders just outright. Once I think of an American that was going over to Africa like as a one of these like Black Lives Matter activist types back in the 90s, where she was you know, murdered.
I know her name. It's Elizabeth something. I know exactly that story.
Yeah, and then they go, oh well, you know, her murderers, they were just like politically angry about racism, so let's let them go free, you know. But what's really interesting about that is then her American parents come over and they say, well, you know, we want to respect her life, so we're shaking the hands of her murderers and stuff like that. It's really this like idea of that is being put into people's head that if there is anything that is happening to white people, it's deserved. Like, we have it coming, you know, we deserve it. And when is the torture and the murder like enough? And I don't think it's really ever. I don't think it's ever going to be enough for these people. And in America, we're dueling these two like suicidal notions where everything in the world is the fault of white people and white supremacy just meaning whiteness or white people. And also with like, we need to be more multicultural. We need much more, you know, we need less white people, but we also need to continue to demonize white people and empower everyone and really like not care about any wrongs that happen to them. So you're really creating a system in America, which is already represented in South Africa, where you have no political capital as a white person. You have no control over your own government. You are a minority, and you are still viewed as the root of all evil and a demon. And if anything happens to you, if you are murdered, if you're tortured for hours on a farm in South Africa, if they rape your 3-year-old kid and just do ungodly things to her and then murder you and your whole family, pour bleach down your throat, well, you had it coming because you're white. And maybe the government doesn't even need to prosecute the people who did this thing because they were just really mad about racism, so let's let them off the hook. It's insanity, and honestly, it's where America is right now headed, and you can see it reflected with the entire atmosphere of America.
Yeah, with the thing about multiculturalism, it's actually just white people that they expect to be multicultural, and it's basically to just eradicate whites completely. Um,
Yeah.
and yes, it is true. I read a statistic on the percentage of foreign murders that gets prosecuted and trialed actually, and it was like less than 30%. And it's just, yeah, if you start reading about those statistics about how many gets jailed, how many is caught, it's not serious at all. And other than that, our police, our security is even, is terrible in South Africa. Like the what I just have to think about it for a moment. Um, yes, we like have like 16% of all our police vehicles don't even work anymore, and like they're running out of funds, and it's just, story after story, and it's just, this is supposed to be a national, this is supposed to be your country's security. And the two, so we had our budget speech, like it was a while back, and the expenditure on education and security, it didn't decrease, but in comparison to everything else that increased and not receiving the increase that it should have, it basically, those are the two things that were cut back on, as you can say it. So it's just this very interesting and peculiar situation in everything, and that you are going to be seeing and already do. There's one last thing. I see our time is actually, been going on for quite a while. So there's one last thing that I just want to throw on the table that I really want to know what you think about, and it is the current affairs on the migrants in America. So I read that there's like one of the biggest surges, or like the biggest surge in migrants on the border in like 20 years. Is that true? What would you say about the current affairs in the migrants situation?
I think right now, and I think this is like the death knell of America, like forcing us into this pathway um, of despair. Right? Is not to say that I don't believe there's any hope or anything, but I just think like politically it's kind of over after this, where Joe Biden has promised at least 11 million migrants amnesty, and he's promised to give a pathway to citizenship to pretty much all broad stroke, like illegal immigrants and stuff like that. So obviously, a rich and prosperous country like America says, oh, well, if you're in our country illegally, we're going to give you a pathway to citizenship, and it's going to be epic, and we're going to put you right at the front of the line. And then, hey, guess what? Because of chain migration, if you become an American citizen due to amnesty, which via executive order, by the way, not passing any of our legislative bodies, Joe Biden, signs his name on a piece of paper, and now we have 11 million new Americans. Every single one of those 11 million can now bring, 10, 20 people from their country over to America, because they're family members or whatever. You can bring your grandma, you can bring all your kids, you can bring, your cousins, whatever, to America, now full American citizens, now voting in our elections, by the way. So now we have, 11 million minimum people in our country, who now owe entirely their citizenship to Joe Biden and the Democratic Party broadly. So who do you think they're going to vote for? we and I hope really that they don't move into Texas, which is going to be a swing state, which is the only conservative base keeping us in the election. So how are we supposed to win anything about this? Do we have a migrant crisis right now? Yes, but it's because these people are very aware that they can utilize migrants in order to enact complete political control over America. And because they can continue to use it to fuel their own politics and policies via this like anti-white hatred narrative which they are spreading. But it's going to have really disastrous results, because I think the progression, right, is from America to South Africa to Rhodesia or Zimbabwe.
Yes.
So that's what you guys got coming in your future. And in our future, and it's going to happen to everyone. White people, we don't collectivize based on race like anyone else, really. Because I'm sure in South Africa, you Boers, you guys see yourself slightly different. We're not even part of the same cultural sphere as the English South Africans. And in France, they don't see themselves as the same people as the Germans or as the Dutch or as the Polish or as the English, right? I'm an Irish guy. My whole family's from Ireland. So what the hell is it my fault for slavery, for the Holocaust, for colonization? My ancestors were some poor potato farmers when all of this stuff was going on, and our lands were being seized by the English, and we were being tyrannized by them. Okay, they were genociding our language, and they were persecuting Catholics when they were doing slavery. But still, I am to blame exclusively for all of this stuff. It doesn't matter who you are or who your ancestors were. If you are white, you are the devil, and you need to be punished for everything that has happened. And you need to take it and say, I'm sorry, while they murder your family, while they torture you, and while they rape you. And that's how it is now in South Africa, and that's how it's going to be in America. It's interesting.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, everyone, for listening. We had a little bit of a technical problem with the weather, which is very good for the lovely weather, but not good for the electricity or for the connection. So, Alex, you were busy discussing on the migration in America, and then it cut off. So you can just wrap it up, because we are going to finish now anyways. So.
I was just saying, it doesn't matter to them that all my ancestors came from, from Ireland, I was being persecuted by the English, who were perpetuating slavery in America and stuff like that, and doing all these atrocities. All that matters is that you are white. All that matters is that you are to blame in their eyes, and really we should just sort of accept it and say thank you. As these things are done to us, as you're tortured, as your kids are murdered and raped, and they'll tell you you're insane for suggesting that it's happening to you in any sort of unjust manner. You just need to say thank you, and that you deserve it. It doesn't matter. That's the narrative, and that's the world. And from as I said, from America turns into South Africa, and from South Africa into Zimbabwe.
Yes, that's true. And today Zimbabwe, 70% of people are living beneath the poverty line. And we also have like a bit of a migrant issue, because South Africa is the better of the worst of the African countries, which is very funny. Because when you read about, South Africa is like the second biggest economy in Africa, then you think, we have a lot of resources, and Africa has a lot of resources, but it's not like we're brilliant, We have terrible debt, we have junk status of all international rating agencies, so it's not like we're great, it's just like we are the better one of the worst ones, and we're failing as well. And I've actually heard it so many times. I've met a lot of Zimbabweans, both white and black, both farmers who were victims of the farm attacks in Zimbabwe, and both black people that are, living under this circumstances now. And the Zimbabweans who come to work here are terrorized by South African blacks, of course, because they're taking their jobs. And it's just, the Zimbabweans are very honest about the reality of what's going on in South Africa. And they always say, we have no idea what's going to happen if South Africa fails, because if South Africa completely fails, they say they have no idea, because we are fleeing from Zimbabwe to work here. And I mean, fleeing, they're like swimming through, rivers of crocodiles, and like they eat rats, and like they really have bad circumstances. And they're just so afraid that South Africa is going to end up exactly in that circumstances. But Alex, it was really nice to talk to you. Thank you very much for being here and for having this conversation with Suidlanders. And we would most definitely want to speak to you again in the future. Is there anything you want to add or to ask or to inquire about?
I don't know who your audience is. I definitely love to share this with my own audience, this interview, because I feel like it is very important to know what's going on in South Africa, just for the sake that there are many atrocities happening. And if you ever acknowledge it here in America, you're deemed a crazy conspiracy theorist. You're ostracized from normal life. But I feel like a really important takeaway is that they are waging warfare against you, even if it is not causing physical harm to you. These people consider what they're doing psychologically to be warfare, and it is being done. And you need to understand that most significantly, that it's not an accident. They're not just sort of trying to make good things happen. They aren't good faith actors. They are putting forward very evil designs upon you and upon our countries. And if you just sort of allow things to happen, and if you allow things to continue to get worse, and you say, oh, well, I can't do anything. I shouldn't get involved in any of this. I shouldn't advocate for my own self. This is where you're going to end up. This is where things are going to end up, and they're going to continue to get worse. That's how it is,
Well, thank you very much, Alex, for that ending words. Suidlanders, I hope you have a lovely evening, and until next time, goodbye.